Are brides liars, or are our customers liars? This is a question that gets tossed around a lot in business circles, and I've heard on business and sales podcasts in the past. People saying that customers are liars because they never tell the truth. And it's something that I've heard reflected in the Abuja event space because I run into vendors who insist that brides are liars, that they never tell the truth, they never reveal what's at the back of their mind, and that you can't trust what it is that brides saying. So I'm sure you guys would be happy to hear, for those of you who are in the wedding space, that it's not a challenge that is peculiar to us. So it's not as if brides lie per se and other people do not, but there are people who are involved in other industries as well, whether banking, insurance, or luxury items, who think that customers lie because they never seem to be telling the truth. And so that's the question that I'd like to address today. Are customers liars? The brides that we deal with, are they liars? So, in a sense, some people will say yes, they're liars because they don't tell the truth. But the way I choose to look at it is that brides are not liars and customers are not liars. The average person believes it's a good thing to tell the truth, and ordinarily they would like to tell the truth in every single circumstance. However, we should bear in mind that we are dealing with a commercial context, and so money is going to change hands, goods and services are supposed to exchange hands, there are expectations on both ends. So we should be understandable when brides approach us, brides and grooms or their parents, and they're a little bit cagey. So it looks like they can afford it, but they lie that they can't. And that's because they are not trusting, they're cagey, they're protecting themselves because they don't want to be taken to the cleaners. They don't want to be stripped of every single thing that they have. Because there are times that we get into it and we think, okay, they're in a tight spot, you agree to payment terms, and then as things go along and after the wedding is over, it becomes clear that it wasn't that they really needed the payment terms per se, it's just that they were holding out and they figured they could use the balance to string you along or something like that. So this is normal and it happens in every single industry. People don't want to show their hands, they're not trusting, they're cagey, and they want to protect themselves. So it's not going to do you any good if you run around saying brides are liars. So for my Abuja folks who keep saying brides tell lies, you can't trust anything they say, don't mind them, they're not serious, it's not going to help you if you're running around with that attitude. We are better off being professional about this, taking the initiative, trying to figure out what the problem is, and then see how we can solve the problem. So if the problem is that they don't trust us and that they're trying to protect themselves, then I think the key question is we should be trying to figure out how do we get them to trust us and what can we do to make the provision of our goods and services risk-free. How can I get them to trust me as a wedding photographer? How can they trust you as a wedding planner? And how can you make the provision of your service as a wedding planner or as a videographer, how can you make that risk-free? Because when people are entering into a commercial transaction and it looks like the potential downside is relatively low, then they're less cagey because what do they have to lose? So, with that being the central question, I'll have to admit that that is more than we can address today on the podcast, especially since I have been naughty the last couple of episodes and I've gone into 20 and maybe even 30 minutes. So I've gone beyond the 10 minutes that I usually allocate for the recording of the podcast. So if trust is the issue, then there are lots of ways that we can go about bringing some trust into the equation. Now, for those of you who've listened to the last episode and are long-time listeners of the podcast, you remember that folks like Tom Hopkins, in his framework for how to approach a sale, has this idea of sales resistance and sales acceptance. So sales resistance is that early period where you guys are feeling each other out and the bride doesn't quite know you, doesn't quite trust you. Same thing with the groom, and so their guard is up. They don't want to be hustled, they don't want to be hassled, So that's that early stage, sales resistance. So you have to get rid of sales resistance before you build sales acceptance. And that's the stage where you're trying to get them to take the next step, to trust you, to pay that deposit, to do whatever it is that they have to do on their own end to get the ball rolling. So for Tom Hopkins, if you're looking at this from that perspective, then trying to get them to trying to get them to lower their guard and to trust us is a matter of dealing with the sales resistance upfront. In fact, that is what Tom Hopkins recommends. He says that whenever you are with a customer, just assume that you have 100% sales resistance. From the beginning, just assume that this person is guarded and the person doesn't want to let their guard down. He says the only time that we shouldn't take that position is when they come to us. So when they come to us, it's not that we're not going to deal with sales resistance, but we'll try and look at figuring out their needs first and then do the sales resistance thing later, trying to get them to know us, to like us, to trust us, and all that jazz that we see all the time over the internet. But if we are the ones that are reaching out to them, then we have to start with the assumption that there's no trust involved. And if you listen to the last podcast, or maybe 2 or 3 episodes back, I spoke about how Tom Hopkins suggests that we can use commonality to build trust and then try and show some competence and some commonality. Yes, I think that was on the episode where I was talking about conversation frameworks. That's the last conversation framework that I addressed. Now, the idea of commonality is, the idea behind it is that people prefer to relate to or do business with people that are like them. So it doesn't have to be 100% like them per se, but if you can establish some commonality, then it should help to get the ball rolling, to get things moving much more smoothly. And if I remember correctly, in the podcast episode where I went over the whole commonality thing, I think the example that I gave there was the university thing. I mean, that's a real easy thing that we can use to establish commonality. You guys are talking, you're chatting, and then it comes up that one of them went to Igbenidion, and you're like, oh, really? You went to Igbenidion? Yeah, I went to Igbenidion too. I was the first set. We graduated in blah, 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 blah. What's the faculty of law like these days? Back then, we only had 3 classrooms and no library, so how are things? What about Professor so-and-so? Is Professor still there? What about Old Booker? Is Old Booker still there? What about this hangout in town? Did you guys used to hang out there? All these kinds of questions. So the whole point is you're trying to establish some commonality so that the bride and groom can see that, oh, okay, this dude, this wedding photographer, he's chill, he's all right, he's like us, he's a stand-up guy. We can relax a little bit around him. And then they don't have to be so cagey. But remember, when we're trying to establish commonality, let's not get carried away and then spend 2 hours talking about all the time we spent together in law school or medical school, or how that strike in 1995 or whatever, how that 6-month strike disrupted the school calendar and we didn't have anything to do at home and blah, 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 blah. So if you spend 1 hour in all these conversations, it might be good and you might gain a friend, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's getting you closer to a sale. That doesn't mean that it's getting you closer to them booking you as the wedding photographer or as the wedding planner. So the goal in trying to establish commonality is just to bring it out, really. So you guys went to the same university, establish that. You guys are from the same tribe, establish that. You guys like the same soccer team, establish that. You and the bride seem to like the same cooking shows on what's it called? There's that BBC channel. Can't remember what it's called. You and the bride like that, establish that. Whatever it is that you need to do, establish and move on and drive the process along. Besides, especially the way I like to do things, there'll be plenty of time for bonding on those issues on the back end. So when you're done with the wedding, those are ways that you're going to be able to carry the relationship along and to keep in touch and stuff like that. So if you and the bride are into the same kind of cooking show, for instance, after the wedding, might not be a bad idea, to call and say what's up. And oh, by the way, did you catch that rerun where Bobby Flay did a cook-off with chef so and so, and then you guys have a nice 5-minute chat or whatever. It's not a bad way to keep in touch with folks, especially in this industry, the wedding space. It's a personal thing, so it's not it won't be unusual for you to call people up, say what's up, and then they start talking personal stuff like that, whether it's Bobby Flay or whether it's UEFA or anything. So you're the wedding videographer, for instance. You guys had a good time during the wedding, during the after party. He looks like a correct guy. You still want to hang on to his digits, So if you call him up once in a while and you remember that he was talking trash about, I don't know footballer's name. So let's say he was talking trash about a certain footballer, and the wedding is over, and maybe that footballer wins the golden boot of the year or whatever. You guys can call him up and resume all that trash talk that you guys were doing around the wedding. So commonality is a good way to get them to trust you and to drive the relationship forward even after the wedding. And so 2 other things that I spoke of, but that's not just all that Tom Hopkins has in his framework. So if you would like to, just Google Tom, spelled as pronounced, and then Hopkins, of course, Hopkins, and you'll get the full skivvy of all his ideas, because he has lots of free stuff all over the internet. So just use the Google machine and you'll be fine. So he also talks about how we can try and establish some competency and some credibility, and that also moves the process forward. And so that's one thing that our high-end photographers here in Nigeria do very well. So for those who have been published in the IWPA, is it IWPA, International Photographers, blah, 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 something. So for those of them, the high-end photographers who've been published on that site or in the magazine, it's something that they put up on their Instagram, award winner for IWPA, or, whatever it is. If you have something like that and you think it's a good stamp of credibility, then bring that up in conversation, have it on your social media handles. Those are ways that we can get the brides and the grooms, or whoever it is that we're dealing with from their family, to let down their guard, and then they know that they can trust us. Now, another thing that Mr. Hopkins advocates early in the process is you need to calm people down. You need to let them know that it's not do or die, that it's not by force. If people feel like you need their money, like you're really, really, really bleeding after their money, then they're going to get cagey. So he suggests that in the beginning, you let them know exactly that. Okay, cool. Thanks for reaching out. I want you to know that, it's not by force. It doesn't have to be me. I'd like to be a wedding photographer, but it doesn't have to be me. I need to ask you guys a couple of questions first to be sure that we're on the same page and that we're a good fit. Also, to be sure that I understand the vision that you guys are working towards, or whichever way you want to go about it. Because some people come at the conversation by saying that I need to ask you a couple of questions to determine availability. I need to be sure that I'm free and to be sure that we're suitable to work with each other. But whichever way you like to jazz up the whole conversation, you have to throw it in there that, it's not by force. You don't have to work with me. We're just having a chat and just feeling each other out, and let's see how each other goes. So if it's me, cool. If it's not me, no wahala. Whatever I can do to help you guys, I will. If I have to make a referral, I will. But it's not by force. It's not a do or die affair. So pick whichever way that suits your, your personality, your verbiage, the way that you talk. So just pick it and put it out there. That is not do or die. It's not by force. Not that you should go and say in a very proud way, like, who do you think you are? I don't need your money. But I'm sure you guys catch the drift. So those are some of the ways, ideas out there that can use to establish trust. And if you use the Google machines and you search, you will find lots of other frameworks that people have for establishing trust with your clients. And if you pause the recording right now, take a step back to the main menu, scroll down, you see several episodes that I've made in the past on trust, especially one that I made last year, which was a review of a Harvard Business Review article about establishing trust. Yeah, that was something that I did last year. So I think I reviewed that Harvard Business Review article in 3 podcast recordings. So you can go there, have a listen, and you find that there are lots of frameworks there for establishing trust. So bottom line is, find a framework that you think you understand and that blends with the way you see the world and how you like to carry yourself. And it'll be helpful to getting brides and grooms to lower their guard and start talking freely with you. Now, there's another guy, old-time marketing guru, Jay Abrahams, who talks about removing risk in the equation. And the example that he gives is, what's it called? The puppy dog scenario. Well, this is something that works in America mostly, the puppy dog scenario, where it has started working in Nigeria now. And that's this whole thing of somebody wants to buy a puppy. So typically, dog rearers, they say, you know what, just take this pup, keep it for 2 days, see how you guys blend. If you think the dog has too much wahala, bring it back. No wahala. Just bring it back, you have your money back. Or, take the dog, you don't even have to give me any money. But if it looks like you guys are blending well, if you look like you like this dog, then you go ahead and you pay the full 75k, for the pup. Sorry, I don't breed dogs, so I don't know how much dogs cost. I just came up with that. So if dogs cost, 150 or 300, I'm just making stuff up. So yeah, that's the puppy dog scenario. And the reason why it works is because it makes the whole thing a risk-free proposition. So you want a Rottweiler, you want a puppy, you're not sure which kind of puppy. Between you and your wife, you guys have narrowed it down to Rottweiler and maybe Bull Mastiff. You're talking to the people. And it's one of the things that the puppy dog people do. They say, you know what, since you're not sure, take this Bull Mastiff and just, keep it for 2 days. See how you guys blend. And then, I'll call you, see how it's working out. And if everything is cool, then you just transfer the 150k and the dog is yours. If everything is not, I'll be there at the house 7 a.m. I'll collect the Rottweiler and I'll give you the Bull Mastiff, and then let's see how it turns out. So you make it a risk-free proposition. Now, I must admit, I've been thinking for a very long time, how do you include risk-free propositions in wedding photography, since that's what I do for a living. And I must admit, I haven't come up with any ideas for now, or any idea rather that I'm brave enough to execute. But as I hang around other photographers and listen to other shows, if I come up with anything about how people are trying to reduce the risk proposition involved in the business, I will be sure to let you guys know. But of course, different ideas apart from this whole deposit thing that some brides and grooms use to hold over our necks. That, you know what, yeah, we agree 1.5, but I'm only going to pay 750 now. Then after the wedding, I pay the remaining 750 and blah 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 blah. So those are some ideas about how you can get people to lower their guards, pretty much. So the problem is not that brides are compulsive liars, or that any client that you deal with in any other side hustle that you have. The problem is not that they're compulsive liars. The problem is that they don't trust you. You're a stranger. They don't know you. This is a commercial situation. Money is changing hands. Wedding planning, wedding photography, wedding videography, no matter what it is, it's expensive. They just don't want to drop 150k or 500k and then, you just miss, and they are lost with no protection. So these are some of the things at the back of their mind, and they don't want to be taken to the cleaners. And so that's the reason why, even though the bride and the groom might be Pepper Aristotles, they'll pretend as if they don't have anything. And they might have the 3 million to cough up front, but because they don't want to give you the impression that Otedola is their father, or that they have Dangote money, they'll pretend and do that whole thing of, instead of giving you 3, let me give 1 mil now, 1 mil next month, and then 1 mil after the wedding is done. So it's a matter of trust, and it's about them protecting themselves. So how do we get around that? Let's look for frameworks, ways of establishing trust, and let's try and see how we can make them dealing with us a risk-free proposition. So these are one of the ideas out there. But of course, this is not exhaustive on the topic. So for any of you who agree or disagree, or who have come across different propositions on this whole thing about why customers tell lies or seem to be liars, and reach out, send me a message, hit me up on the Instagram, DM, or you can leave a voice note over here on the app if you're listening to it on the Anchor app, and then we'll see how we can make that feedback a part of future shows, and we'll keep riffing on this so that we can all get better at the end of the day. So thank you very much, guys, for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based event and wedding photographer Tarishima Ayede. Again, apologizing to you guys because I've gone over the 10-minute mark. This is 20 minutes today. I will try and take it back to the 10 minutes that we had been hitting for several weeks up until most recently. So thanks, guys, for listening. Thanks for your time and attention. I'll catch you on the next recording.